of InnoVint. I'm Ashley Letter, the founder and CEO of InnoVint. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. And I'm joined by my colleague, David Ronconi. Quick background on me. I've been in this industry for about 20 years now. My first 10 years were spent running wineries and making wine. And these last 10 or 11 years now have been spent running InnoVint and helping wineries be successful. I've been consulting with wineries now on their operations for a long time. I've spent a lot of time in Sonoma County. I've worked with many of you, so I'm keenly familiar with your businesses in the incredible region in which you represent. And so has David. David, I'll let you introduce yourself.
It's a pleasure to meet everybody. I had the startling realization that I am celebrating my 15th year in the industry, spanning across production. I've worked in D2C sales, I've worked in distributors, and now working on the B2B side. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you today.
Great, thanks. So we tried to fit all of this content into 30 minutes. It's not a lot of time to cover what we have to cover, so we're going to move pretty quick. Like Tracy said, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So David and I will go back and forth a bit, and we'll try and manage that and monitor that as much as possible, but we'll leave time at the end for questions. We are starting by covering what we feel is our most interesting insights for you from our State of Winery Health report, which we executed this year. We will focus on Sonoma wineries and North Coast when possible, benchmarking you against your peers and peers in other regions. We're looking at 3 dimensions of health here: financial health, operational health, and cultural health. Then what's these insights and analysis without action? I'll dive into some tips for you to apply this year to improve your health and offer even more benchmarks than the ones not listed in the report. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to David, who will walk you through some of those reporting results and analysis. Oh, no, not yet. I jumped ahead. No. First, before we do that, I want to quickly touch base on why InnoVint's here today and why we're a credible resource to reflect and report on winery health. I'd imagine many of you know InnoVint and what we do, but I like to say above and beyond providing the industry with the best wine production and cost accounting software out there, we truly strive to help wineries run better businesses holistically as a whole. 11 years ago, the industry was starved for better solutions, which is why I started the company. We've made a lot of progress, but the industry still has a long way to go to fully embrace technology to run your businesses. We're fighting the good fight to bring wineries into this modern age to be able to enable you to compete at the end of the day fairly with other beverages out there that are vying for your consumers. If you want more information on what InnoVint does and how we serve wineries, David's your man. Email him or talk to him afterwards. But again, that's not why we're here to deep dive InnoVint functionality and value. We're here to talk about winery health. So now I will turn it over to David to walk you through the results.
All right, so just starting off, earlier on in the year, we were kind of trying to figure out the best way to understand what is the current state of the industry, and what better way than going through a survey process. So we're going to talk obviously about a lot of the various aspects of the survey, but did want to let you know we'll make sure that we provide the full survey to you after the meeting. So no stress if we're going through this pretty quickly. But just to kind of set the stage, we ended up having over 450 respondents for the survey. So we felt like we got a really good, core data set to go ahead and start, diving in and trying to get a better understanding of what healthy actually means in the wine business. So actually looking at the respondents, a couple things that we wanted to kind of point out. We got a wide range of departments, regions, winery sizes, and really, felt like we were able to get that kind of good snapshot of what's currently happening in the industry. As I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody on this call today, there's definitely been some headwinds, and there's been articles coming out about some of the doom and gloom. But I'm really happy to say that a lot of what we found in the survey was a little bit more uplifting. starting off here, the very first question in the entire survey was, how would you rate your overall winery health? It's kind of a great question to start out with because once we dive a little bit deeper, we started to kind of think, well, maybe there would be a different answer, after having gone through all these questions. But looking out here, we can see that 56% of wineries believe that their winery professionals believe their wineries in either good or excellent overall health. Which is great. That's fantastic that we see that more than half of wineries surveyed are really feeling optimistic about what's going on in the future. But that obviously does lead itself to how do we bring the rest of the wineries to a place where they feel comfortable and confident in their winery health. Diving specifically into data around kind of the North Coast here and how we compare to the rest of the industry. Great job, everybody here, or I should say the North Coast, we're at 57% of the surveyed felt that that they had great financial health at the winery. Compared to the rest of the industry at 54%, we're definitely trending in the right direction. There's a lot of things that are being done well here in the North Coast. With that being said, that means that there still is a lot of room for finding ways to build confidence in the winery health and keep moving in the right direction for a healthy future. Here's the million-dollar question, no pun intended. Is your winery cash flow positive? Obviously, cash flow is a very important factor when we're looking at wine businesses. We are it's a long-term goal in the wine industry to make money. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. So that cash flow is king. Good to see that 65% of North Coast wineries, are profitable. And, really, when we look at compared to the rest of the industry, we're in the top three. So we're really heading in the right direction. Couple things to kind of take into mind is when we're talking about these different regions, there are a variety of new businesses just getting off the ground. There are regions that can't necessarily rely on brand perception like we can here in the North Coast. And also, you have to take into account that California really is the gold standard for wineries in the United States, and we've got decades and centuries of history here. So great to see that we're at 65%, but it always lends that question: how do we continue to get to that towards that 100% goal? Here we're jumping a little bit into gross profit and net profit. First and foremost, I want to kind of preface this slide. Only 40% of the wineries surveyed actually knew their true gross and net profit margins. So that's an important takeaway to begin with right there. That means that there's 60% of wineries, at least, I should say at least 60% of those surveyed felt like they didn't have a good sense of what those gross and net profit margins are, which means that there is definitely some room for either education or improving processes to really build better education on how we approach healthy wineries as a business. Overall, that kind of speaks to the blind spot that we see in the industry around net and gross profit margins. So around 70% of Northern California wineries had a profit margin of less than 20%. Let that sink in a little bit. We definitely are in an industry that we should be shooting for much higher profit margins. Actually, Ashley's going to give a little teaser. Ashley's going to speak a little bit more specifically towards that towards the end of the presentation. But really, what it boils down to is 20%. We really need to start asking questions about how we can improve those profit margins and get to a place where we can sell less wine and make more money and find ways to make sure that profitability is consistent. All right, here is another great question around profitability is how confident are you that your wines are priced appropriately? So setting that right price is so crucial to making sure that profitability and cash flow are working in your favor. So only around 2/3 of the wineries are confident in their strategy, so that's great. But again, we're still seeing that at least 1/3 of wineries are still finding that they don't have that really great insight into knowing that they're pricing their wine in a way that is not either leaving money on the table or missing out on opportunities that they could be hitting on. With that being the case, actually, just one more thing. I encourage you to kind of go through the thought process. When was the last time you really evaluated what your wine prices are and why? It's an important thing to consider because a lot of times we kind of set a price and then, year over year changes, year over year increases, can sometimes just be kind of habit rather than really, critical thought. When it comes to pricing, obviously, the two channels we're looking at here are D2C versus wholesale. Generally speaking, regions outside of California and Oregon rely more on D2C channels. We do have the benefit of relying a bit on wholesale compared to most of the rest of the country. So, with that being the case, you do need to start thinking about how is our wholesale impacting our D2C? Are we pricing effectively in the market versus what we're charging in the tasting room? Are we potentially cannibalizing opportunities to sell more D2C at a much higher margin versus selling in the wholesale market? So really important to take those into consideration. Cool. Shifting gears just a little bit, one of the other areas that we put a lot of focus on was looking at the overall winery operational health. According to the data, Northern California wineries are pretty on par with average, 67% versus 66%, meaning that 67% of the professionals believe that their company is in good or excellent operational health. And that's great. We are definitely seeing that there is, a lot of optimism around making sure that, or a lot of work going into making sure that operational health is a focus. One of the things that we noticed, though, is respondents shared a large appetite for constantly improving, and finding ways to kind of consider external factors like costs that impact wineries across the board. So at this point, we've kind of gone through a lot. I want to check in any questions that have come up, to kind of just break so far. Great. Let's keep on moving forward. All right. And obviously, when it comes to operations and healthy operations at your winery, one of the things that we notice is that adopting the right technology and software to run the winery is absolutely essential. So when we look at wineries that indicated that they do not utilize modern software, we see that there tends to be a bit more of a struggle. So what that kind of tells us is that access to critical data is challenging. And so decisions are made in a way that might not be as data focused and are sometimes more gut, which can kind of lead you down the wrong path sometimes if you're not careful. So with that being the case, software adoption, modern solutions are definitely important and have a huge impact over over various aspects of health, not just when it comes to cost, but also in operational health as well.
I will add the anecdote here too, that this is the impetus for founding InnoVint. Was being a winery employee and manager myself, I saw the lack of data-driven decisions, a lot of frustration of especially like younger talent coming up wanting access to better tools that would enable them to do their job more effectively. So to David's point, it does, having modern technology isn't just for like checking the data box. It actually drives operational efficiencies and cultural health with the employees that are expecting to use modern tools to enable them to do their best work.
Yeah. One of the questions I always ask is, if you ask the difficult questions, how much time and energy are you spending to find the answers? Because that can be the difference between making really great decisions efficiently and then sometimes getting lost in the weeds. All right. Moving over to company culture. As Ashley mentioned, we're looking at the holistic health, not just what's going on the day-to-day. We want to take a look at, what is it that makes wineries, winery employees excited to go to work every day. This is one area where, looking at kind of North Coast here, there definitely is a little bit of a discrepancy, in the rest of the industry versus what we see here. 76% of respondents said that they've got a great culture, which that's great, over 3/4, but the average was around 80%. So then then the question is, how do we continue to make sure that company culture is constantly a focus and finding ways to make sure that our employees are engaged and excited about what we're doing on a daily basis. So, it comes down to that vision and supporting employees and, having leadership that is transparent and goals that are very clear and attainable to make sure that your team is constantly feeling empowered. So there's a pretty wide breadth of personas that actually took the survey. So it's sometimes interesting to look at a breakdown of cultural health by role. So one thing that was a little bit of a surprise for us was just seeing that winemaking teams specifically, including winemaking leadership, rated that their winery cultural health was a little bit poorer compared to other departments' analysis. So with that being said, we need to start kind of asking that question: why is this happening? Why are we seeing a higher percentage of particular roles that are dissatisfied in their job? Obviously, we think we've got some helpful insights there, and we'll I'll leave that to Ashley to share a little bit more in depth. But I think these are important questions to ask when it comes to employee retention and making sure that people are sticking around for the long term. It's a really important to make sure that you're on top of these challenges. And then this was another really cool thing that we saw. I think this was a little bit of a surprise for us in the survey that was kind of a nice, happy surprise. Is 79% of cultural healthy wineries are actively involved in the community. We were chatting about this the other day, and I think over the past 4 years, there's kind of been a little bit of a hermitizing. I know I'm making up the word of the wine industry, where people are getting a little bit more siloed. They feel like they're a little bit more disconnected. So it was pretty cool to see that, getting out in the community, going to events, meeting up with other winemakers, meeting up with other winery employees that are, experiencing similar challenges and similar difficulties. It's such an important part of creating an active or a healthy community, a healthy culture at the winery. So, really kind of, I think that's a pretty low barrier to entry to say, hey, let's get out there. Let's be part of the community. Let's continue to lift each other up around, Sonoma County. All right. And I'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
Great. Thanks, David. All right, let's get to the juicy part. So what are some tips based on all that you just learned from David? What are some things that I can recommend that you can employ tomorrow or the rest of this year or thinking through into next year? Let's start with financial health. Okay, some tips. Let's start with this first one. Employee winery financial best practice. The first question for you to think about: how confident are you that you are employing best practice? If you're the owner or GM of your winery, that's a really important internalization to make. If you're not sure, that's probably a good sign that there's room for opportunity here. And I would say a lot of wineries will employ financial help from outside the wine industry. And we've seen major gaps in doing that this is a unique industry that requires curated financial cost accounting practices, and controllers in general. So if you need a few resources, we've listed 2 here. There's more I'm happy to share. But the first one is, I'm sure many of you know, Jeanette Tam. She is a QuickBooks expert, and she has a bunch of courses here. One is actually on how to use InnoVint and QuickBooks well together. Recommend that. As well as the second link there is a link to a webinar where it was a conversation between myself, a CPA, an accountant, and an M&A advisor in the wine industry that talked about financial best practice. Highly recommend that as well. Secondly, here, related to that, employ and ensure accurate cost accounting. InnoVint, we're experts in COGS, and I can't tell you how many wineries are intimidated and simply uninformed on how to do this accurately on a per product basis. Be proactive as well with your outside accountants. Like, make sure, I just spoke to a winery last month about how they're years behind their cost accounting. They don't know what they spent on their 2021 wines. Like, that's a problem. You need to fix that. And there are resources out there. My team is really great. If you have questions about just COGS best practice, But there's also external fractional wine industry CFOs that you can go to, and they can help consult with you on just setting you up for success. And we could recommend some of those as well. Thirdly, David mentioned this, the importance of involving winemaking and other departments in key financial conversations. Winemaking, if you have a brick and mortar winemaking facility, or even if you're virtual, that's a pretty significant cost center for you. And it's worthwhile including them because they have a unique perspective and they have unique expertise. Employ them and empower them to take ownership of their costs and know that cost per SKU. It can only benefit the business and help them feel more empowered. And then lastly, consistently measure your business against financial benchmarks. David alluded to this. Why don't you go to the next slide, David, and we can share this chart. So we put this together with industry financial and accounting leaders, as well as winery finance executives to create this table. This sometimes isn't like publicly exposed, but we feel like it's time to share these benchmarks that the industry should know about. And of course, there's fluctuation by like case count and things like that, you know, your annual production volumes, but just sit with this chart and ask yourself, where do you fall in these important KPIs for your business? Is there anything that you don't know off the top of your head? Now, if you're in a leadership position, it's probably something to uncover, right? If you're sitting here thinking, I don't know any of my metrics on these, great opportunity to find out and see where you fall against these figures. Okay, let's go on to operational health tips. The first one seems so obvious, but it's still so underutilized, the impact of using data to make informed decisions. It is so valuable to do so to help you improve your products. Are you making the right products that your consumers are buying? Do they have the right margin on them to continue making them? How about processes? Use action-driven data to inform best practice and efficiencies. Really, really powerful. And that obviously requires some great technology that's making it easy for you to garner those insights. The next one here is don't let your teams work in a silo. We mentioned this a couple times now. Improve cross-functional communication, especially focusing on shared goals. We find that being really valuable, that when teams are siloed from each other, it's really hard for them to miss the big picture. And when they're all unified behind the same goals, you'll get that business outcome from them driving towards what you need them to drive towards, which is business success. Deploy the best software. Obviously, we're a little biased here, but this is true. I mean, again, the wine industry is unique. You need unique technology service providers curated to you. InnoVint being one, there are many others, and not just utilizing them, but maximizing the value of them. Like if your winery is using InnoVint for production management on a daily basis, awesome. You're seeing a ton of efficiency gains there. But if you didn't know that we also do finance and cost accounting, like that's an easy flip of the switch to maximize the value of that investment and also help inform your operational and financial health so you can drive and make better decisions. So I mentioned the industry specific technology partners. We have a slide here, this next one that just shows like a snapshot of what that could look like to kind of give you a frame of mind of how we think about these different areas of technology application. You have the vineyard side. So whether you're farming or growing or sourcing, you need, data insights there. Production management, of course, there's, control and automation systems. There's production technology, of course, like InnoVint, workflow management. And then, of course, on the sales side, the DTC and sales analytics and 3-tier applications. There's a lot of good data analytics layers there too, like Wine Pulse and Analytics that can give you that next layer of insights. And then, of course, the financial layer. Most of you are probably on QuickBooks if you're small to mid-size, but there's also these new ERP players that are up and coming. So, just think through, like understand it may be worth the exercise of actually putting this on paper and knowing what technology you're employing and where there's opportunity. Or, cost management, right? If these are really populated, there is, an opportunity to consolidate perhaps and save some costs. All right, now let's focus on cultural health. So the first one here, the first tip I have is to involve your team in the why, not just the what. Again, seems straightforward, but if you're a GM owner, how much are you articulating and bringing your team into the mission and vision of what you're trying to do for your wine business? Incorporate them into your strategy work. How are you measuring performance of your team? What are your KPIs? Bring them into that. They'll feel more empowered by you engaging them in that way. Ties to also open communication, constructive criticism. I read a blog last week about this, and there's some like little tips here that if you're talking to your team a lot, using inclusive language is really helpful. Shifting from they to we can transform mindsets. Using phrases like our team and our winery or our organization fosters a sense of unity across these units and teams. Also encourage constructive criticism. How much are you opening the door to allowing your team to ask questions? Let's just start with that. Can they ask you questions about the health of the business? Can they ask about what their DTC wholesale distribution is? Make sure you have that open line of communication. I think you'll learn a lot from your team when you do that. Thirdly, allow and encourage employees to get involved in the community. David mentioned this as his last slide there, how important and impactful it is. It actually ties to business health, to winery health and success. You're here showing up for this webinar. That's a great first step. Like, you're involving yourself in Sonoma County Vintners. Encourage your team to watch this after the fact. But it goes beyond this, right? There's so many ways to get involved in the community, from events to forums and discussions. Encourage your team to seek new perspectives from each other, leverage peer experience, and be open to share successes. Of course, that's easier to share, but also lessons learned to kind of rise the tide up, right? Like Sonoma County, ships can all rise with a rising tide together. Even outside the county, I think the wine industry can benefit from cross-regional collaboration in this way as well. The next one, practice ethical stewardship. This is really important in 2025. I'm not going to define what that means. I think it means something different for every winery in a very beautiful way, but know that your team and your consumers deeply care about your commitment to this. How is your retention? And this is employee retention. How is your employee retention? Is your team, stable? Are they happy? If not, perhaps you should reevaluate your benefits package. It may take more to retain them now, and it can go beyond just base pay. Like, there's a lot of incentives that you can offer. Like, if it has a well-being stipend that we give to every employee every year that they can spend on whatever makes them happier professionals. And it's something that they really value. And then lastly, measure this employee satisfaction if you haven't. And we had a really great webinar with 2 winery owners about employing, about their cultural health. And one of them shared their satisfaction survey questions, which is this next slide here from David. And I'm not going to read these, but go back and reference this after the fact, because there's some really great questions here to ask your team. And once you know the answers, it can form your next step. So if you're not already polling your employees, this is a great start to figure out where to go next. All right, that's it for the tips. This is InnoVint's 5 tenets of a healthy wine business. Believe it or not, we wrote this before we executed on the survey and the report. This informed that strategy. We said, let's ask the rest of the industry if they agree with us, if they feel like this is that important. And it was very validating to see the results reflect these themes. It confirms the importance of wineries being profitable, pursuing operational excellence, relying on data, building that positive work culture, and being community-centric. If you want even more information from some of your peers, we hosted 3 webinars this summer, one on financial health, one on operational health, and one on cultural health, featuring these 6 folks. So really enlightening, and I encourage you to scan that QR code and go watch those as well if you've enjoyed and found value in this content. Here's some of our trusted partners. We mentioned, fractional CFOs and fractional HR professionals and industry-specific accountants and CPAs and M&A advisors. A lot of them are here. But if you have any questions, it goes beyond this. We're happy to help inform you and advise you on who we feel are the best in the industry to help you with these initiatives. All right. Lastly, this is the Punchdown. If you're not aware of the Punchdown, this is an online digital community for anyone wanting to bridge gaps within regions, across regions, apart from your normal small networking text groups and Facebook groups. It's something that InnoVint's founded and hosted, and there's a lot of areas for education and asking technical questions. There's marketplaces for jobs, marketplaces for equipment exchanges. I encourage you to check it out. It's something that I would have loved to have when I was a winemaker, to be able to ask Sonoma County winemakers from my spot in the Santa Cruz Mountains about best practice in making Pinot Noir, as an example. So we're really excited at the traction that it's got this far, and we encourage you to join and participate. All right, that concludes our presentation.
Does anybody have any questions?
Any thoughts or kind of observations that resonated particularly with you?
Greg LaFollette here. You will be posting this that we can follow up and look at it closely?
Yes, Greg, that it will be on our website under our Scion programs, and you'll be able to view that in a day or so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, my comment is, I think this was such a valuable webinar, because what you talked about was resources, right? That wineries so often feel like they are a silo, or they are on an island, and that they have to do everything themselves, and they can't. And the majority of our membership are small wineries, and they don't have those resources internally. And you gave us a lot of great ideas of people to lean into. And so I really appreciate that. The one thing that stood out to me also was the community involvement, and how that is so important to your team. And obviously it is to us, because part of our business is a nonprofit, and our work that we do together to give back to Sonoma County is so important to us, and is really such a founding statement for us. And we are really looking forward to providing that opportunity for our members to get more involved in the community with some of our programs next year. And it's just nice to know that that is so important to other winery and to winery health.
Thanks for sharing that, Tracy. Yeah, we agree. And I'm still shocked to find I come across wineries of even like a pretty good mid-size that don't know that there's external resources that can help them for a fraction of a cost from like hiring a full-time employee to do something. There's a lot of, fractional HR resources that can put together some surveys for you, or best practice, or retention packages, things like that, or even fractional CFOs that can come in for a couple $1,000s and help just consult with you on how you internally can then turn around a better process. It doesn't have to be this huge investment. So to your point, especially for smaller producers that don't have in-house, finance or in-house HR, right? You're not that size. There's a lot of resources out there to help you.
Absolutely. So John has a question about benchmarks regarding percentage of marketing and sales costs for wineries. Do you have any benchmarks on that?
We didn't ask that in the survey, but it's a really important question. And John, I'm happy to kind of go to my network and ask them that work on like winery P&Ls and look at all different size of wineries across that. I think it's good, for us to note in the future, Laura, that we can include a bit more granularity here. But those are great questions.
Yeah. His other question would be benchmarks for DNA spends on wholesale as a percentage of FOB. So a little bit more granular, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit more granular than we got from our report. But again, great questions.
This might be I don't know if anybody would be so bold, but after kind of going through this, does anybody have any kind of observations of their own winery that kind of stuck out to them today that, hey, this is worth kind of reevaluating or take another look at? Yeah, we'll make sure we have the slides available for you so you can start to have those conversations internally. But appreciate the questions.
Well, fantastic. I think we'll wrap up for today. Like I said, it was such valuable information, and thank you so much for your time. And this will be posted on our website. And you can also email Ashley if you have any questions directly. She just popped up her contact information in the chat. So thanks again for being here, and thanks for your time. Laura, Ashley, and David, you've been just so great to work with.
Thanks, everyone. And in addition, we'll email out all the links to the resources, like I mentioned in the chat. So thank you for your time during lunch, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.